if that's okay.
Yeah, all done.
Perfect. So welcome to the last show and tell of Discovery. So we've got a couple of sessions today with kind of the team, but for kind of everyone, this is our last show and tell of Discovery. Steph's going to be leading the majority of this presentation because she's done all the fantastic work, really, so it doesn't seem fair to do anything else. So she'll be going through today some of the research objectives, the insights from both hub users and hub providers, and then I'll cover off next steps at the end. In the report that will be published in the session that we have later on today with the team, we'll be going through some other bits, so like the user needs and the procurement stuff. But for this session and this hour, we'll be going through the insights. So hopefully that is okay with everyone. Conscious of time, we've got a lot to go through, so I'm just going to go straight into it, really. So Steph, pass over to you and just let me know when you want me to move the slides on.
Yeah, so if you go on to the next one, please. That's it. Yeah, great. So the objectives of this whole research piece was to essentially find out the needs and requirements of both hub providers and hub users, which are Welsh workers between the ages of 16 and 67. Is it the same retirement age as England? I'm not sure. Yeah, just finding out their expectations for an online booking portal, all around their behaviour around internet and technology, if they had any experience as well of using a hub, or even if they knew what a co-working space was. Lots of them didn't actually know what a co-working space was. It was completely brand new to them. So it was quite interesting to hear their feedback and some of the issues they've experienced as a result of sort of being forced to work from home during COVID. There were quite a lot of issues there that participants have experienced. Again, with hub providers, it was quite interesting sort of hearing about the hub space and what facilities they've provided. Some of them provide some really good facilities. Other ones, and I'll go into this later, don't provide sort of anything other than a desk and a chair, which I'm not sure is going to be sufficient when this whole program's rolled out, but we can discuss that when we go on to the user needs. So as you can see here, so the research covered the following topics, and the discussion guide that was used was discussed with Leah and Gwyneth, I think James and Gareth and Hannah. We all sort of had a look and had a go at contributing to that. So can you go to the next slide, Hannah? Yeah, so I know, should we change that?
Yeah, sorry, that's my browser version. Coming to haunt me. I think I'm on it now. Let me know if it's the wrong slide.
So I spoke to 10 hub providers. 6 of those were private hub facilities and 4 were local authority run ones. The local authority hubs, they're still in the process of developing their hubs, so they're not actually up and running at the moment. But the private ones they've all been running hubs for quite a long time. I think one of them, they've been running hubs for over 10 years, so they had a lot of experience. And then, as previously discussed, hub users, I spoke to 14 sort of various ages. Actually, can you go on to these? Not the next one, slide, I think it's slide 8. That's it. Yeah, so I think you've seen this slide before, so sort of just the same one. So 8 female, 6 male, 6 public sector, 8 private sector, and 4 with various disabilities. And we had 3 Welsh speakers as a first language. So next slide. So this is just a run through of the internet and technology behaviour of participants. So this is what I started off with discussion with. I would ask them about their internet use and what technology devices they used. Also discussed their broadband and mobile signal quality, and this tended to influence what device they used at home, particularly as lots of them had poor broadband and maybe a strong mobile signal, or vice versa. I think there were a couple who had poor broadband and a poor mobile signal, so they really struggled. Next slide, please. So once sorry, just to say as well, this is all this discussion that I'm talking about now. This is hub users, not providers. I didn't make that clear. I asked the participants about their experience of working from home. I think everyone had worked from home apart from one participant who was a nurse who didn't have, well, she just couldn't work from home, obviously. She did say that there was nursing staff that do work from home. They're at a higher grade. They sort of do admin type tasks. But she didn't. She was sort of worked in hospital, but everyone had worked from home. And I think you can just see here just some of the issues that they experienced. So participant 10, who's delivery driver manager, he had two or three big dogs at home. And they always wanted to play with him during the day, so he struggled to do his work because of his dogs. I think, Hannah, you've got the same problem, haven't you? So he had dogs or pets that distracted him. The teacher, I think I've spoken about her before, she struggled as she had a really weak broadband connection. And she often went to, I think it was either a friend or a relative to run her lessons during COVID because her internet was so bad, or she tethered her phone to use it. So those are sort of a couple of reasons as well why they would find these hubs useful. So to go and get a bit of a break from these issues that they experience at home. So next slide. So I've just collated a few of the reasons why participants would use a hub. So I think there were a couple of participants who've used a co-working space before. Most of them hadn't, and as I said before, some of them weren't even aware what they were. After I sort of at the end of the interview, I would sort of say, do you think you would use a hub? Do you think it's a useful idea? Some of them at the start sort of said, oh, I don't think I would have any use for using a hub. But then once we've gone through and discussed what they were, they realised how useful they could be. So you've got the teacher there she has an admin day every other week, and she said it would be really useful if you could use a hub. Property landlord, he said that he often has company meetings in Starbucks or coffee shops. So he could hire a room and use it for that. There was the artist who thought that if possible, there was a room large enough he could do arts and crafts. I don't know whether that would be feasible. He's 7. He ran charity, and he said that he could run charity meetings from there. Sales manager, him and his wife both work from home, and he said when the kids were at home as well, when they were all using the internet, it slows down. So obviously to go to a hub would be really useful. Got the delivery driver with his noisy, distracting dogs, and P13, who's an occupational therapist, she's having real problems at the moment finding venues to run manual handling training. for carers. She said if they could hire a room at different hubs around Wales, that would be really useful. She's actually looking to do that now. I think I need to speak to Lynn and Neil actually about this. She contacted me. So yeah, so those are just some of the reasons why the participants would use a hub. So it's quite varied. It's quite interesting. Next slide, please. Yeah, so as I said before, most of the participants didn't even realise that there was an existing network of hubs in Wales. As you can see there, that participants sort of said, oh yeah, I'm surprised Cornwall had one before Cardiff, but Cardiff in Wales have had these hubs for quite a long time, the private hubs. And I think I think Hannah's mentioned this as well in her notes, that I think there needs to be a sort of comms campaign to make Welsh citizens aware that there will be these government-run hubs available to them and the online booking portal, because most of the participants, either they didn't know what a co-working space was, or they didn't know that Wales actually has got quite a few hubs. So next slide, please.
Yeah, and I think it's something that we bring out in the recommendations in this afternoon session. The remote working team on the call, is that something that's really important. And I think when we've already spoken about it before in one of our sessions, that wider piece around the communication strategy, because I assume that a lot of people probably would use it, and it would definitely grow if they knew about it. Obviously, that's an assumption.
Yeah, we discussed it, and I've discussed it with Lee. So we're looking at that as a maybe a task that we need to do.
Yeah, I think especially as if it's going to be free for public sector workers, I can see it being really popular. And if there are subsidised for private workers, I can see it being really popular. So I don't think we'll have any problems with take up. Okay, so yeah, so this is. So I also asked, once we've got around the remote working experience and knowledge, I asked the participants where they would expect to find promotional content around the hubs. Most of the responses sort of public sector locations, so the Welsh Government site, local council websites, obviously social media, but particularly if it's Facebook, lots of the participants mentioned the Welsh Government Facebook page, and maybe local councils' Facebook pages, Wales Online, LinkedIn, Metro newspaper. I think there's a business support website which the private worker participant mentioned. One of the participants who lives in Anglesey, she mentioned that she's often, if she's driving across the bridge, that she's often behind a bus, and you often see adverts on the back of buses, and she thought they were a really good idea to publicise the hubs. And then another business site, businesswales.gov.wales. And then I think, as I said, so business sites, so Business Wales and business support. Okay, so next slide, please. So due to the participants' internet and broadband signals, this tended to influence sort of where and what device they would expect to use if they did want to book a space in a hub. So it mainly, I think, was sort of even between a laptop or mobile device. I think mobile was probably the more popular option, just because I think it's more convenient, isn't it? If you're at home or you're at work, even if you're at work, you can just go on there. So I think that will have a bearing on the finished, the sort of final solution, and that it needs to be, I suppose, either responsive design and or maybe a mobile app. Something to think about there. So move on to the next slide, please. That's right. I also asked the participants where they would expect to go on the internet to find the booking portal. I think I sort of know that it's going to be a standalone, or there are expectations that it will be a standalone web address. But participants mentioned that they would expect it to maybe either be on the Welsh Government site, although quite a few of them did say that they found the Welsh Government site quite difficult to navigate. Other locations included library sites, again, this businesswales.gov.wales, and also local council websites, sort of mentioned quite a few times. So it might be that the booking portal has its own address, but there are also links to the site on these pages, or I don't know, a plugin maybe, I'm not sure, but these are sort of the locations where participants would expect to find, I suppose, either content and a link to the booking portal. So I'll go on to the next slide, which is, or the next slides, which are all around the actual online booking portal and the specific needs and requirements of the participants. So what I did was I asked them various questions around what facilities they would expect, or I suppose what content they would expect to find on the online booking portal that would enable them to make a sort of informed decision with the space. First of all, though, I've spoken about this before. I asked them about their language preference. They all said English, even the Welsh speakers. Once it got to sort of about the 10th or 11th participant, I sort of said, oh, everyone said that, what's the reason? And I think you can see here that the delivery driver, he was a Welsh speaker, he said, I think because everything you're doing is in English, why would you suddenly swap over to do something in Welsh? I think that's the main thing. But they all said, even though they all said they'd use it in English, they didn't say they all said that they would expect it to be in Welsh as well. I just thought it was quite interesting. And P14, he's sort of fully Welsh, yet he speaks Welsh. But he just in English. So yeah, thought that was interesting. So next slide, please. So in terms of the most important factor in selecting which hub to use, it was location, which probably makes sense, and that all the participants wanted something near to their home. I think a couple might have said they wanted really strong broadband, but overall it was location, which I think I mentioned in the feedback session a couple of weeks ago. And I think I mentioned as well that they all said that they would drive there, other than the participants who are sort of city-based, which I think is the next slide. But I had to think about it, and I thought that when I was doing the interviews, the hub locations, they sort of were and they still are unknown. So assuming that a hub is within walking distance or cycling distance, I think workers would prefer to use that method. I'll go on to the next slide where a couple of participants do say that they prefer to walk or cycle. But most of these are in, apart from P9, who was based in, I can't say it, Canelli. He said that he would prefer to walk. But yeah, it's all of them, it was sort of location first and then driving. Can you go on to the next slide? Yeah, so the participants who lived in urban locations, all sort of large towns, they expected to either walk, cycle, or use public transport, which sort of makes sense because probably no parking. And then you've got the participant in Anglesey, who stated that she would, if she could, she would like to cycle there. So I think it all depends on where these hubs are located. I don't think if they're located near someone's home, I think they will walk or cycle. So I know, Gwyneth, you sort of mentioned this a couple of weeks ago about the driving, obviously trying to reduce driving. So yeah, it all depends, I think, where the hubs are located. But I would imagine for rural-based workers, they're probably going to have to drive, even if it's a short drive, unless there's a hub in a small village, maybe. But yeah, urban locations, they would prefer to use public transport or walk or cycle. Okay, so the next slide discusses the facilities that participants wanted to know if the hub had before they make the booking. So this is really important in terms of when a user is on the booking site, they need to be able to find out whether a hub has got some of these facilities in order for them to make a decision as to whether they book this space. Because obviously they don't want to just book a space, turn up, realise there's no power socket, there isn't high-speed Wi-Fi, it's wired Wi-Fi, etc. So I think this is what I was talking about, I think, Gwyneth, last week, that user experience, and about it can just be a few words that can result in either someone thinking, oh, I can't find what I'm looking for, so I won't bother, or I'll pick up the phone and phone someone to find out if they've got a scanner or if they've got high-speed Wi-Fi, etc., etc. So the most common items were a printer, scanner, and photocopier. And then I think the next one was charging sockets, which I think when we discussed, when we were talking about the questions to ask, I don't think we even thought of this, but quite a few participants mentioned this and had stories of being in libraries or university sort of study rooms where there's a socket, but it's on the other side of the rooms, and you have to sort of take your laptop over there and sit down with your laptop while it charges. So the charging sockets is quite an important feature. I can't remember, because I've looked at quite a few hub sites, and I can't remember seeing any content or copy about charging sockets. So that's another item that will affect the user experience when the booking portal is rolled out. Do anything? Has anyone got any questions or anything? No. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. There were again a few participants that mentioned that if they were to use a hub, they sort of needed a sort of quiet space, and they didn't want to be sort of do hot desking, i.e. sitting on a large table with lots of other people, for sort of data security reasons, which I'll go into later, or just the sort of, I suppose, maybe anxiety reasons, and that they just don't, I suppose they didn't want to be in a large group that they've never met before and they don't know. I think in terms of the online booking portal, probably be quite useful to have maybe a floor plan and photos that give the user an idea of where they'll be sitting. Otherwise, again, either they won't book somewhere or they'll phone up, I would imagine. I think there were a couple that said that a large and busy hub would increase their anxiety, so they probably wouldn't use it. And I think there was one participant that I said if there were 20 spaces at a hub, and you could see on the online booking portal that 19 had been taken, would you book the 20th space? And she said no, she didn't, because it would just be too busy for her. So the whole sort of issue around occupancy, I think, is quite important for the online booking hub. I think that a lot of, some participants, they weren't bothered, but some of them, I think it's going to be an issue if they can't see how many people have already booked or how big or small the space is, if they can't get an individual desk or a sort of an office, that type of thing, or maybe like a little hub type space where where you've got 3 screens, that type of thing. So there's a lot of requirements around the actual seating and desk space and the layout, which I didn't realise would be that important, but it is for quite a lot of the participants. So next slide. Okay, so this is quite a big insight, and this mainly related to public sector workers. They all said that because of the nature of their work, they needed to keep either their data secure, or if they were having meetings, online meetings or telephone calls, they needed to sort of to keep things confidential and secure. So the teacher, she mentioned, I think I've mentioned this before, obviously she's got things like photos and information related to her pupils, and she said she'd need to keep that private. There was a financial inclusion officer who dealt with housing tenants details and would often take calls from really vulnerable clients, and she said that she would need complete privacy when she's working. And also the maintenance coordinator for, I can't remember what it was, but he's a public sector worker. He said that most of his meetings weren't confidential, but once they started to discuss financials, they would need privacy. So again, you're a public sector worker and you're on the booking portal, you want to book some space for say next Wednesday, how do you know that the space you're booking is private? So that's something else that the solution we have to incorporate. So next slide, please.
Just while we're moving on, I think just to make everyone aware, we're going to run to the whole hour. And I think this was originally in 45 minutes, but please let me know if that's a problem for anyone on the call. Yeah, just let everyone know.
So accessibility as well. So you've got accessibility in terms of user interfaces. Again, a few participants talked about the actual accessibility of the furniture. So if you've got a bad back, you obviously need a sufficient chair. In terms of the space as well, and they talked about how the actual disabled access to the hubs and disabled parking space. So again, that's something that needs to be on the booking portal, whether the actual hub is accessible for disabled users. And last slide for hub users. And I think I've spoken about this before. So I showed all the participants a website, an existing website for a co-working space. And the dyslexic participant really struggled with that website. There was lots and lots of content on there. Couldn't process it, and the white space, the background was too bright for her. There was another participant as well who had sunlight scope sensitivity, who again really struggles with a bright white background. It seems to cause quite a lot of problems. Quite ironic because that's the sort of GDS design, but yeah, so bright white with lots of text and lots of images isn't accessible for these users. So again, something to take into account in the final solution. So that's everything for hub users. Has anyone got any questions? No.
I think just a comment from me, Stefan, that this could almost be taken. Obviously, we're doing it from the angle of the hub user needs to know what's at the hub in terms of on the booking system. But actually, when you go out and start doing the wider kind of work as well, whether that hub is fit for purpose, there's a lot of stuff in here that the kind of participants and the users are saying that they need. Yeah, so it can kind of be taken in two spirits, I suppose. Yeah.
I don't know whether Gwyneth and Leah, whether it's, I don't know what your plans are, but I think the feedback from the participants is not conflict, but I don't think it matches what particularly the public sector hubs are intending to provide. I think there's a bit of a shortfall there. Particularly, I think because they're public sector and they're not private, they're not profit making. So I don't know whether there needs to be. I think it might be useful if maybe some of this feedback is passed to the public sector hubs, particularly around the privacy element, because that's something that I wasn't aware of, and I don't know whether you were.
Yeah, we're aware of data protection, especially amongst certain public sector organisations, and particularly Welsh Government, for example. And when you talk about printers, that becomes another issue because you're sharing a printer, and how does that become a common printer, if you like? So those are the sort of areas, if one wants a printer, that it's not unsurmountable, but there are definitely barriers to some of these things up front that we will have to overcome.
Yeah, I think as well, if we're going to have a hub which has a mix of private and public sector, that might cause issues as well. Again, obviously with printing, meetings, etc. So
Yeah.
it's lots of,
I mean, it's an insight that's good because this is, you know, a mix of private and public. So we thank you for that. Yeah, the accessibility stuff is really obviously something that we're keen to get right. You know, sunlight, scope, sensitivities, all those white backgrounds I suffer with. So I
really?
absolutely, yeah, that's what I've got in my left eye. So yeah, it's an interesting piece. And I think the thing about dyslexia, which we can often forget, you know, that there's an awful lot of people with dyslexia, how we overcome some of those busy websites, if you like. So yeah, the insight's really useful to me. I've written a lot of notes down. But yeah, as you say, in regards to the public sector and how we overcome some of those things, it's definitely conversations we need to have.
Yeah, because I think I've got in the next part, I've mentioned that there was, I think, a couple of the public sector ones, when I asked them what facilities they were going to provide, they just said, oh, just a desk and a chair. Just think,
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to cut it.
Well, you know, for some it may, and that's it.
Yeah.
This one size doesn't fit all. But like you say, is it important, you know, to have that charger and to have that no, the anxiety is an interesting one because I think possibly the anxiety has gone up. I mean, I know people who since COVID, so you know, I know people who won't go to the gym because they know there's 19 people in that class, as you just described with a desk. So, you know, you're not going to take that one class space just purely because there's too many people in that class. So you go to the classes that are not as oversubscribed, if you like. And I didn't think of that in the same way as a local space.
Yeah.
But I think that we got to be mindful of that over the coming years.
There was also, I think, the occupational therapist. She's recovering. Well, she's cancer clear now, but she's had cancer quite recently. And she said that she's sort of interested in what sort of COVID secure steps are taking in terms of how clean and wipes and sort of screens and things. So that's another thing as well. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, so just go on to the hub providers. I don't think there's no. So I think it's 10 slides. It's not too bad. So yeah, so I think, as I said, the private hubs, obviously, because they're trying to make a profit, so they have a much more sophisticated offering than the public sector hubs. So yeah, so range of desks, you've got all your printers, your scanners, internal cafes. One of the hubs, I think the first one I spoke to, they even offer a business service. So if you want to have all your business post, and I think even a registered office address, they've got that. So yeah, obviously much more geared towards sort of office workers and businesses, and obviously they're trying to make a profit. So I think, as I said, I think it would be interesting, or just to have, I suppose, talk to the local authority hubs to find out what they're doing. So, as I said, I think a couple of them are just only providing desks and chairs, which might be suitable for some, but that needs to be made clear. That is all they're offering on the booking portal. So next slide, please. So I think I've discussed this before. So the private hub, there was in terms of the booking process, it was a combination of commercial off-the-shelf software, a sort of tech stack, or it was sort of almost sort of 75% manual, in that the user will go onto the website, enter their details into a form, and then the hub will call them back, or they'll correspond via sort of going backwards and forwards with email. And then once the booking has been confirmed, they usually enter it into some sort of calendar. So yeah, a range of sort of technology being used. One hub, I can't remember which one it was now, they're using Eventbrite, which I think when you've discussed, which it offers free card online booking for free events. So they're using that at the moment. The ones, the providers that are using the subscription-based software model all said that if the booking portal provided a back end for providers, they would prefer to use that. Obviously, it's going to be free and obviously the Eventbrite, but the hubs that have purchased their own software, they would prefer to carry on using their software, which makes sense. So yeah, it's another thing to think about. So next slide, please. So this relates mostly to the private hubs. They have a range of customers in their hub. So most of them have a membership. So you join a hub as a member, and then I think you pay a direct debit monthly for the hub. They have walk-ins as well, so people that just walk in off the street, you can pay there and then for a hub space. Or they've got the customers that go through the website and either book using form or via telephone. So again, that has sort of ramifications for the online booking portal in that the hub providers presumably will need to block out some space for walk-ins and the members. Yeah, so that the second row here, there's a pay, I think it's a PayBot system, one of the hubs is using, which is a subscription-based model that actually has a membership functionality on their booking within the booking process. So again, that's something to discuss. Will the online booking portal have membership functionality? Do we want public sector workers and private sector workers having membership? I don't know. It's something to think about. Next slide, please. So in terms of the time slots and sessions that the hubs offer, it's essentially a combination of hourly, either a morning or afternoon session, daily and monthly. So I think the most popular time slots were either morning, afternoon or daily. The monthly sessions, I think, were more for corporate customers who are sending their workers. But again, that's something to bear in mind for the online booking portal in terms of how our users going to book space, which presumably will be up to health providers. So, yeah. Next slide, please. So in terms of payments, most of the hubs all have a like a mini card reader. I think it's Settle that they use, some of them use. So they have that. They have direct debits for members or memberships, and then invoicing for corporate users. I actually took out one of the slides around payments. I think that's something that needs to be discussed in more detail, but it's just this is the insights as to how hub users are currently paying. One of the private hubs, in terms of the transfer of money from, say, if there was an online booking portal to your private hub, mentioned Airbnb, which I've mentioned before, because their post-payment processing is considered to be quite easy to use. I think you just add your bank account and then payments are routed after so many days. And then as a host, you can download a CSV of all the payments and all your account details and account summary, etc. So that's one, I think, exemplary process payments, which is in existence, if anyone wants to look at that. Next slide, please. So technology and data security. So these are some of the example software that are being used. So Nexus, Office, R&D, Ascensies. I think Ascensies are being used for online booking, but they also provide sort of cyber security facilities. MS Forms, which I think I discussed before, was used for the Welsh vaccine booking system. Rico Spaces is another software, and the Paybox, which used. Then you've got hubs that have essentially developed their own tech stack sort of booking software solution. And then you've got this quote here. This is the first participant actually that I spoke to. So you can see this. So we spent a long time researching options and landed on a platform called Nexus, which is a co-working space platform. Actually, what happened is that we haven't ended up using anything because it was difficult to set up. So it involved team trading. So they purchased this software, but it's too difficult to use. So they've just gone back to manual booking. So thought that was quite interesting in terms of if a off-the-shelf software solution is purchased, that it can be used by the users. Yeah. Obviously without lots of support as well. So, okay, next slide, please. So the data security, this is quite interesting as well, and that most of them, they outsourced it. I think they realised that there's sort of so much risk with keeping your systems safe from hackers and ransomware, etc., that they tended to outsource it to third parties. So yeah, so we've got this Ascensies that offer IT security, and Techies was another name that was used. So they outsourced that data security. They also, the ones that purchase off-the-shelf software, also would purchase software that sort of complied to the security standards and GDPR. So yeah, I think that's quite interesting as well, that they realised that it's probably too much for them, being quite sort of small hubs. So they sort of outsourced. Can we go on to the next one, please? So I'm not sure how this will work when the booking portal is operational, but obviously there are some providers that are not using any software. They're just manually entering bookings into, say, a Google or a Microsoft Calendar. There are some hub providers who've got their own sort of bespoke tech stack, and then you've got the ones who've got the off-the-shelf software. Will that be integrated with the booking portal via an API, or will the booking portal, as I said, take over the back end for the providers? I'm not sure, but mostly the hub providers who purchased the software wanted to retain that software, because clearly they spent a lot of money on it. The hub providers that are using the subscription-based model aren't too bothered and be quite happy if they could use a sort of Welsh government solution. And then this, I think, P10, which was the last participant I spoke to, which is like a local authority council hub. Again, they would be quite happy if there was a national booking system that they could sort of jump on the back of, and then they could save money with not having to purchase their retail software. Again, something else to think about. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I think, as I've said, so the providers who've got their own booking software, they will need, I suppose, and vice versa, the online booking portal will need to integrate with their system, and their system will need to integrate with the Welsh Government system, so that both systems are up to date and you don't get over bookings or double bookings. As for the hub providers that don't have their own software and it's doing it manually, how will they receive the shared data from the Welsh booking site? Again, something else to think of. Next slide. Yeah, actually, I've just spoken about this. So yeah, so booking portal will need to share data with the hub providers who don't have any booking software. We've also got the issue of walk-ins off the street, so that will remove a space. How will that be mirrored and be well for the national booking portal? I think it's potential to get quite complicated. And the last slide, there was sort of mention around sort of fraud occurring, and how do you, I suppose, verify or authenticate the identity of someone coming into the hub claiming to be a public sector worker. I suppose making sure that they are the person who they say they are. I think some of them use, they've got a sort of what it would be off-the-shelf software. Once you receive confirmation of a booking, you can see the QR code, so you can use that. I think another provider mentioned that most government staff will have a card, don't you, an identity card, so you could use that. But again, it's just something to think about, particularly with the public sector workers, if the space is free. So that is everything. So I think has anyone got any, before we go on to the next bit, has anyone got any questions? Quite a lot to think about, I think.
Yeah, lots of information stuff, I think, there. Just covering off next bit, so I think that might cover the questions a little bit as well. So in terms of what happens now, so we've got a further presentation with the remote working hub team this afternoon, pretty much in half an hour, I think, isn't it, guys? Quick lunch. So we're going to go through in a bit more detail the procurement stuff. We're going to have Warren joining us, and then the user needs and stories, so breaking all those insights down into what does that actually mean when we go out to procure for the tool. We'll send the final report by the end of today, so you have that in your inboxes. And then I guess it, like Steph just said, there's a lot of information in there. So if you guys take your time to kind of review that, and then we can have a kind of final meeting where we go through any questions that you've got specifically on the report and kind of what's contained in there. There is loads of information, so I think you guys definitely need the time to kind of take that away. However, that being said, if there is any questions, please do kind of unmute and ask now. If not, we can kind of combine them in the later session. But if anyone from CPS has any questions, please feel free to ask those now.
Just got one, if I may, in regards to the hub providers and the technology that they're using, stroke data security, you know, their external data security. Did you get a sense of the kind of costs that they are charged? I mean, you may not have asked that question, but it's always useful to know where an opportunity may lie.
I didn't ask Gwyn. I don't like talking about financials. I don't think they would have known, to be honest.
No.
Because they weren't. Maybe the Cobot guy, he might have known.
Right. Because sometimes it's not just cost, it's resource intense, isn't it? So, yeah. Okay, thank you. I just thought I'd ask.
Any other questions at all before we close the call?
What I've done,
okay,
sorry, Gwyn and Lee. So all the insights I've sort of converted into user needs and stories. So that's all in this this pack as well. So that's quite a lot of them. So yeah. So don't worry about thinking that you have to go through each slide. I've actually done that, and I've created user stories that correspond with all the insights. So it's been done for you.
Yeah, we can spend a bit of time in our next session kind of going through those and giving them a bit of flavour. Cool. All right, well, thank you very much for attending the show and tell. I think, Jem, you've recorded it, so if anyone wants access to that recording, just let me know. Gwyn and Lee, James and Gareth, I'll send that to you guys with the report anyway, so you've got it, because that makes sense. And I will speak to those that are on the next session in half an hour. Thanks very much, everyone. Bye-bye.